Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Dangle number 1 through 4, published by Drawn and Quarterly Comics between 1991 and 1995. Lloyd Dangle, all throughout the late 80s, was in a bunch of anthologies, had a lot of funny little short stories, and he also syndicated a comic strip called Troubletown to a handful of alternative newspapers. But finally in 1991, technically in 1989, he got his first solo title published by Cathead Comics. And in 1991, Drawn and Quarterly decided to put out this title, Dangle, and reprinted the first issue. That's what this first one is, a reprint of that Cathead comic. But the rest are all new. And I don't know if any of these reprint things from anthologies and things like that. But it's some pretty fun stuff. Let's take a look. So number 1, this is the reprint issue. I guess a lot of this one definitely has a lot of anthology reprints from stuff he did in 88, 89, probably around there. But I gotta say, this cover is so baffling to me. I was staring at it for like 15 minutes last night. It's like claymation or something. I can't tell if this is a sculpture that Lloyd Dangle made, put in front of this painted backdrop of Coney Island, and then photographed it. I don't know. I keep staring at it. I'm not sure if it's just a painting, but it has this amazing 3D effect to it, like claymation. So I'm baffled. I would love to find information about this, but it's a pretty striking cover. It definitely stands out. We have a little inside front cover with a collage of letters and postcards of Coney Island. And we start off with the barbecue pit. A lot of Lloyd Dangle's stories, especially his earlier ones, are like autobio comics, but they don't read like, your typical 90s autobio comic. He actually becomes that way later on. These ones are more just like crazy, zany stories which start off with some incident from his life, but then obviously spin off into some pretty fantastical directions. And this is a perfect example. It's a pretty fun story. So I guess at this time in the late 80s, Lloyd Dangle was living in the big city. I think it's New York. And he was living in an apartment building. And he loved to barbecue meat on the roof. One day, this busybody neighbor pokes his head up there and says, "You're not allowed to do that, the landlord wouldn't like it. There's no barbecuing on the roof." And Lloyd Dangle basically is all like, whatever. And I guess this guy says that his kid can't study when there's people on the roof, and the smoke kind of sucks into his window, and it's annoying. But Lloyd Dangle says, mind your own business. I'm going to keep doing this. And so the strange thing about this dude is, even though he has a kid, he's a drug dealer, and he has people at all hours of the night come buying drugs. So Lloyd Dangle, of course, is like, screw this guy. If he tries to rat me out, I can rat him out. So I'm going to keep barbecuing. It's almost like he barbecues more than normal just to piss the guy off. There's also this couple who everyone in the apartment's annoyed with because they have a baby and they throw their bags of dirty diapers into the hallway for the diaper service to pick up. But the diaper service goes on strike. So the apartment is full of methane fumes because this baby shit. I love this, how he draws the wiggliness because the methane fumes. It's almost like you're looking through methane, And meanwhile, Lloyd is once again barbecuing, not realizing that there's an apartment bursting with methane under him, and the whole thing explodes. And I love this panel of all this crap falling from the skies. How I got published in a big glossy magazine. And I like these early strips where He doesn't have his style nailed down yet. Every panel is kind of like, looks like almost could be a different cartoonist. This almost looks like it could be like Mark Merrick from New Wave comics, you know? He has that very like crude, raw style, like a lot of those 80s cartoonists had. I guess they're all like, you know, the children of Gary Panter type style. Very sloppy. But this is a fun little story. Obviously starts as autobio and then gets all zany. He can't meet this editor. He's been trying to meet this editor, and they keep giving him the run around. And so he dresses up like Tom Wolfe, the famous author and bon vivant, and tricks his way to meet the editor. And he gets his cartoons published through various shenanigans. Some really fun stuff. I like Lloyd Dangle's one of those guys who just draws funny. Like, it just looks funny, you know? This one's called Report from the Disaster Scene. This is when he's living in San Francisco. And I guess he goes through a pretty bad breakup with his girlfriend. And this is just like a snapshot of his life at the time. It's a low point. It's not a good time. His girlfriend keeps calling him up and like basically harassing him, just leaving messages like, God, I hate you so much. I never want to talk to you again. Call me when you get this message. Like shit like that. So he tries dating again, but you know, he can't get his head into it because this whole breakup has messed him up. He's got writer's block. You know, it's just a little portrait of this bad time in his life. Pretty well observed. I really like this story. We've all been there. This one is called Tides of Freedom. And this is talking about when Lloyd, back in the 80s, he got a job working at a very liberal political magazine. And he was just out of college at the time, so he's really down for the cause. He's just a very political kid. And so even though it's a crappy job, he's basically a paste-up artist. He's really into it because he's down for the cause, you know. He's like, I'm helping the liberal side. His editor is named Pooh Wright. And he's kind of like an old liberal, old lefty. He's kind of a douchebag. So basically this is just lots of, work-a-day incidents. Basically his job sucks. He has all these instances of just like hating his job, having constant deadlines. And the whole time, he has so much work, he can't even like break away on the weekends to go to Coney Island. It's like his favorite thing to go to Coney Island. But he hasn't got in weeks. They keep piling work on him. So the Pooh Wright gives him a big assignment. He's got to take all these photos of these, or at least obtain photos of the military-industrial complex, weapons and dumps and stuff. So he calls up this General Fuckleberry, actually gets on the phone with him. And I love this, how Fuckleberry comes through the phone and he looks around and says, what kind of commie bullshit is this? I'm not giving you squat. I'll send you a miniature American flag instead. So meanwhile, because of Glasnost, a Russian intern, unpaid intern, starts working at the magazine. And it seems like Lloyd and her have eyes for each other, but they're all so busy that they can't even think about romance. So when Lloyd gets the flag, he sneezes into it and sends it back to the general. We see more just incidences of how crazy his job is. The sales ad lady is a nymphomaniac who's chasing him around the office, trying to have sex with him. We see the editor is totally making these passes at the Russian woman, being kind of sleazy. So since he can't get the photos of the military stuff, He's got to go to like these military toxic dumps and take photos. He's like seeing two-headed dogs and shit. Meanwhile, back at the office, General Fuckleberry showed up, and he wants to kick Dangle's ass. In the comic, he's called Dingle, thinly veiled. He sees the Russian intern, and he says, a Russian spy, I knew it. And he pulls out a bazooka. He's going to shoot her. But then the editor stops him, and all of a sudden, there's a news announcement on the radio, a news flash. And the Berlin Wall is coming down. It's the end of the Cold War. And, Russia stopped being communist. Everyone's happy as a clam. People are like breaking out beers and wine, and except for the general who says, what'll happen to our big defense budget? And the liberal editor, what'll happen to the movement? Because he knows that without, the evil empire of communist Russia, nobody's going to really care about this political stuff as much. And so Lloyd finally makes it back to the office. He's got the pictures. And the editor says, forget about it. We're going to run with this puff piece. Nobody's going to care about that shit anymore. And so Lloyd's had it. He just says, I quit. And because his friends call him from Coney Island, they're like, you should come down. And he's like, fuck this, I'm going to Coney Island. And the Russian woman overhears him and says, can I come along? And she does. And they have this great day at Coney Island. Next, we have Tales of the Uncommittable. And this is Lloyd Dangle kind of psychoanalyzing himself, talking about how he always had a problem committing in relationships. And pretty good piece. He just ends up, he goes to therapy. It's too expensive to maintain. So he ends up just hanging out in a bar all day, obsessed with a child actress on a TV sitcom. This is Apartheid House. It takes place on a college campus. We see this frat. Their letters are KKK. And they're actually called Apartheid House. I don't think this is true. I mean, the seed of it is true. There definitely were a lot of racist frat houses. And these guys are totally racist. They see a black student walking on fraternity row, and they all start yelling at him and insulting him. So the black guy says, fuck you, man. And so they confront him. They're all ready to fight. And the black kid says, what if I get some of the black student council to come over, make it even? So it turns into this big race riot. The cops come. And so the dean changes the rules. And basically, I don't know if this is right when, the hate crime laws came into effect or if this precedes it. But he basically says from now on, anyone saying anything disparaging due to someone's race or country of origin, they will be expelled. We're going to take this seriously. I like this panel here. He's reminiscing about the glorious days of the 60s when the students actually fought for social causes. But it looks like they're just fucking and doing drugs and having a great time. That's what it looks like. So he has these 3 quotes from the prominent figures of the 80s, showing that there was just a lot of racism at the time. I mean, there still is, but people didn't know how to code it as well. Here's Donald Trump, a young Donald Trump. I remember he said this. He says, if I was at the beginning of my career now, I would want to be black. They have a tremendous advantage these days. Such a clueless fucking moron. And so basically he gets into the serious discussion about politics, but he's still funny as hell. That's what Lloyd Dangle's thing is. A lot of Troubletown strips talk about politics, but they never get pedantic or whatever. They're always he always puts comedy at the forefront. So the frat guys, the Apartheid House guys, are really worried. They're like, oh my God, they might disband us. And we might all get expelled. But they call on their lawyer. Their lawyer says, don't worry, boys. They can't take away your freedom of speech. And that big party you wanted to have tonight? Go ahead. It's private property. You can do whatever you want. Just don't let me hear about it. He says, see ya, boys. So apparently they're planning their party, and it's going to be a slave auction themed party. So obviously these guys have not learned a damn thing. I wonder what that kind of party's like. This is called Observations from the Other 9%. And this is his reaction to the victory in the Gulf War that America had. And the title is a reference to how 91% of Americans were just overjoyed by the outcome. So he's talking about the people who weren't, who knew that it was all bullshit, like himself. And he just talks about all this shit he's seen. And, you know, this is around the time when if you were against the war, people would say, oh, you're not supporting the troops. What, do you want them to be killed? It's like, no, I don't want them to be endangered. I don't want them to go to war, especially for, you know, bullshit. And there's cheerful crowds everywhere, and Lloyd Dangle can't stand it. And so basically it's just his political commentary about that. Here's an ad for Troubletown, his strip. And we have this interesting little photo back cover. I like all these little drawings here. Just random things. Okay, number 2. God, I love this cover. The colors, everything about it. So this is the first official drawn and quarterly issue, since that first one just reprinted the original Cathead Comics number 1. So the cover stock is much nicer now. There's certain pages of color. Though I really don't like this, like in Japanese manga, where they just color a few pages of a story and the rest is in black and white, because it's just a tease, because these colors are phenomenal. And there's no credit for them, so I assume they're Lloyd Dangle. But they're really nice. They get better, too. This is, I love the color pages in this. But then you get to this page and you're like, damn it. So this one's called Funny Men's Lament. Once again, Lloyd Dangle analyzing himself. And he talks about how he was always the funny man. You know, when kids would pick on him, the bullies, he'd try to make them laugh so they'd leave him alone. He'd tell a joke. He'd, he said it helped out a lot in life. He'd meet friends. It helped him with the ladies. Definitely a lot of ladies like a guy with a sense of humor. It got him a good job because he was a cartoonist. So he made really funny cartoons. But eventually there's a downside to being the funny guy because it's almost compulsive. And, he's joking at a funeral. And he's kind of lost out on jobs because at the interviews, he couldn't help but saying some self-disparaging joke. And basically he just makes a buffoon of himself a lot. So his self-esteem is totally tied into if he's funny or not. I used to be like that. I'm so glad I'm not. I don't care anymore. I'm not funny at all anymore. I don't care. But I was totally like the wannabe funny man guy. I don't know if I was funny, but I was trying to crack wise. So this crazy drug-addled couple at the end stab him for drug money. Because he says that he attracts all these crazy people because they see him as a kindred spirit. Because, he's the wild and crazy party guy. I like this, too, how when he's trying to be serious, everyone thinks he's joking and they laugh at him. He's being dead serious here. He's in despair. And this guy's like, stop it, you're killing me. This one's called Detroit is for Voyeurs. And this is just about how if you tell people you're from Detroit, I guess back then, maybe it's still that way now, all these hipsters would be like, oh, dude, you're from Detroit. Murder City, how cool. Tell me more. And he says, there is something about Detroit, like it definitely, people from Detroit, they definitely have a lot of attitude. And he shows Madonna, Iggy Pop, and Michael Jackson. I guess they all came from Detroit. And what they lack in aptitude, they made up for in attitude. Though I would argue that Michael Jackson had a lot of fucking aptitude when he was a little kid. So he's just kind of poking fun at Detroit people and the people who love to romanticize Detroit. But then it turns out he didn't even grow up in Detroit. He's from Ann Arbor, which is really a suburb. Totally different than growing up in Detroit. And he just has some anecdotes about being a teenager. And basically now Detroit, or at the time, I'm sure it's the same way, there's just all these suburbs around Detroit, and they have all these freeways that kind of go over the city. So you don't even have to drive through Detroit to go from suburb to suburb. You can totally avoid Detroit if you want to. And Detroit is just a shithole. And it's, there's no social services. The monorail's busted. Nobody goes there. But the suburbs keep growing. Almost like parasites on Detroit's dying body. I guess Kathy Geiswhite was from Detroit. Kind of fun seeing him ape her style. And basically at the end he says, the next time you rent RoboCop, start thinking about Motown. Just remember they don't make records here anymore or cars. All they make is fantasy for voyeurs like you. So he's demytholizing. Wait, is that a word? I don't care. He's taking the air out of the myths. So this series has a bunch of sketchbook pages, which are nice, but kind of annoying. I'd like more comics, Here's a cute one. Flea Tours Limited. It's a cat. Here's some sex-themed gags. Now we have a delivered job. God, I love these colors so much. And this is a wordless comic. This is going to continue into the next issue. So we see this artist. He's literally ripping his heart out of his chest to put up on the canvas, putting his heart and soul into his artwork. It's a fun panel there. And then because it's wordless, we get all these kind of word balloons that so this is a crying baby is analogous to the annoying beeping of a fax machine. So Lloyd comes out of his artistic reverie. And when he looks back at the art he's drawing, it's just a shitty piece of commercial art. So he gets the fax, and it's the bosses who are saying, we need that art immediately. So he's like, So he considers calling up a bike delivery guy, but they're all busy or injured. Actually, most of them look injured. I guess that's probably when you're a bike delivery guy, that's happens often. So he gets a bright idea. He says, I haven't ridden my bike in a while. I'll take it out. Pump up the tires. I'll deliver it myself. And as he's leaving the building carrying his bike, I don't know what these guys are doing, some kind of industrial project here. But they say, look at the sign, no bicycles, which I don't understand. If you're doing this kind of shit, why would you care for bicycles in the room? I mean, there's asbestos cans lying around. So they get in a fight. Lloyd, I'm assuming this is Lloyd Dangle. He tells the guys to eat shit pictographically. And they go tearing after him. They're going to kick his ass. Now we're back in this gray color. And he gets on his bike. And he escapes. And he pictographically calls them dicks. We see these dicks with legs running. And all of a sudden, this other bicyclist stops him. He says, dude, there's this pit. They're doing construction. You'll fall in. You got to turn around. And Lloyd Dangle basically says, fuck off. And he keeps driving. And this other bicyclist is like, oh, he's in for trouble. That looks like a great tattoo flash right there. Some more sketches. And now we have Sob Story. And this is an interesting story about his relationship with his father. And how his father was definitely a, let's say, mercurial guy. He wasn't the nicest guy. But every now and then, his father would stand up and help out his kid. And basically Lloyd Dangle's talking about how those were the best times of his childhood. Once his head was bashed in by a careless batter at Pee Wee League baseball, and his father showed up and totally took him to the hospital and made it right. And one day he got his own dog savaged his face, and his dad rushed him to the hospital. Lloyd describes these as magical moments, but for the most part, his dad wasn't that nice. In fact, he used to beat the dog. That's why the dog was so mean. And then the father slips into this depression, stops going to work, and spends some time in the state mental hospital. The kids at school make fun of him for it. So one day Lloyd snaps and he beats the shit out of this kid. But he actually breaks his own hand. He hurts himself more than he hurts the kid. His father dresses him down for it. He's like, if you're going to get in a fight, make damn sure you hurt the other guy worse than he hurts you. In school, he starts drinking, teenage drinking. And his coach catches him. Coach Elmo. And Elmo kind of makes Lloyd his personal project. He almost like his personal crusade. He rode his ass so he could become a productive member of society. And it kind of works. Lloyd graduates high school and kind of becomes a hippie. Here's him and his hippie friends in Mardi Gras. When he goes back to Michigan, to visit, he sees Coach Elmo, but he's lost his job as coach. I guess he was fired for having sex with one of his students. And so now he's a bouncer at this bar. He doesn't even recognize Lloyd. So Lloyd moves to New York. His building collapses. I don't know if it's that combination of rooftop barbecuing and baby diapers. But he goes back to visit his dad, who now lives in Mississippi. And the father has no sympathy for him. So Lloyd joins a men's group. And him and his girlfriend are visiting his parents. This is years later. His parents are pretty old. And his girlfriend convinces him to give his father one of his Troubletown comics. And the father reads it and just says, "This stuff is too bitter. There's already enough sadness in the world." And Lloyd runs away crying. So it's just, your father can still get to you no matter how old you are. He's a grown man and his father can bring him to tears still. Pretty well-observed autobio. I kind of like that one. We got a letter page. And then this really neat-looking color strip, kind of drawn in a different style, Reviewer's Night Out. And it's basically just a weird gag about this music reviewer. Look at this. Very interesting coloring and art. Next, we have number 3, another great cover. So there's inside it says cover photo by this guy. So look at this. I think this was like a canvas. Lloyd Dangle drew these figures, but then he drew this figure and put it over it and made the arm kind of reach up towards the viewer for a 3D effect. We can see the shadow. See how the shadow is bigger here than here? As if the arm is rising up from the canvas. So just another interesting, weird little thing to do to a cover. So the inside front cover and the inside back cover and the back cover are this strip, The Pen. And basically he's just talking about how the pen is the mightiest weapon of them all. Kind of that old saw. Continues here. Gives a shout out to Julie Doucet. And then it continues with the back cover. Kind of interesting. Now, the opening story is another autobio comic, For Elise. And this is about relationships. So that girlfriend that we saw in last issue, visiting Lloyd's parents, they've lived together, and it looks like they've been dating for a while. Seriously dating. And this is just about, kind of a typical story about relationships, just how, after the honeymoon period, your partner could totally get on your nerves, vice versa. Basically, you wonder why you're even together if all you do is argue and chop on each other. And that's what it seems like his life is like. His girlfriend is always just nagging him and saying mean things to him and criticizing him. And he's not so great either. So definitely Lloyd Dangle has solidified his art style by this point. Well, he did 2 issues ago, actually. I didn't mention it. But I really like it. It's just so fun. It's so crude, but it's so perfect for the stories he tells. And it's just basically them arguing. They argue so loudly that the neighbors worry about them. They're like, shit, maybe we should call the cops. Lloyd thinks to himself how he doesn't get it. In past relationships, there was obvious reasons why he was in trouble. Like here, he's having sex with his girlfriend at the time's best friend, and he gets caught. But he's like, I don't get it. Now I'm a fucking saint. And she's always mad at me, and she's always pissed off. He fantasizes about having sex with other women, and I guess when they're in this kind of mood, they just do things to annoy each other. And so his girlfriend takes out the For Elise sheet music by Beethoven. And we'll find out why. But Lloyd really does not like hearing For Elise. And he begs her not to play it. And she plays it. I love this here, how the musical notes turn into nails that go right through Lloyd. He holds his hands to his ears. He's screaming no. And when he looks over at his girlfriend, her forehead is throbbing. And this little person comes out of it and grows to full size. And it's his over-domineering sister who really bothers him. And so every time she plays For Elise, his girlfriend turns into his domineering sister. So he runs screaming. The neighbor's just like, oh, what is this crazy guy up to? And then he tries to borrow $20 from him. So I guess this is technically is a separate story, but it just continues from the last. She's reading a book. They get in an argument about it. And we find out that they have a cat who's very savage. If you just try to pet this cat, he'll just rip your arm to shreds. So she's a cat person. He's not. So they're so every day they're just constantly bickering. So they have these dinner guests come over, and they bring their newborn baby. And you could tell that Lloyd doesn't really like this dude. They're not really friends. But, the wives are friends, or the girlfriends are friends, So they retreat to the comic book library room and make small talk. Meanwhile, the two women, Lloyd's girlfriend just bitches about her relationship with Lloyd and how he's such a terrible boyfriend. I remember this period in my late 20s, early 30s, and 40s when just a handful of my friends started having babies, and it was like they just became different people. And they weren't fun anymore. All they wanted to do was talk about their baby. And it looks like Lloyd's definitely like one of those people. Also, this shit, like the guy's telling Lloyd, like, oh, you just can't understand until you have a child how fulfilling it can be. Oh, God, I pity you. And Lloyd's just like, shut the fuck up. So dinner starts, and, it's kind of awkward. So Lloyd is just getting drunker and drunker. He's not having a good time at this dinner party. Because all the couple wants to do is talk about their baby. Finally, Lloyd just says, "Can we talk about something else?" And right then, the baby poops his diaper. So they run off to take care of the baby. And Lloyd continues drinking. And it is really weird. I thought the comic was over. We see this one-page strip, Cheese Doodle Blues, lyrics by Duke Dangle, 1947, music by Ray Dinkle. And it's this supposedly old song about a cheese doodle truck driver. And what a great life / shitty life he has. So then we find out what happened. We're back in the story. Basically, while they were cleaning up the baby, Lloyd passed out and dreamt that song. After the baby's cleaned up, he starts waddling over to the cat. It's the mean cat. And Lloyd tries to stop it, but the cat totally scratches the baby, and the baby starts crying. And so they rush out of there. And Lloyd kind of has a smile on his face. It's like, well, I don't like that cat, but he got rid of those two. This next one's called Wanted for Murder. This is another autobio one. Kind of aimless, this one. Just about how Lloyd and two other friends were going to start this comic magazine. And they go on a road trip. I mean, the drawing's great, but it's a kind of... doesn't really go anywhere. There's some mistaken identity where these cops bust into their hotel room thinking they're murderers. It's just, not that great. 2 pages of letters. Some more sketches. Bike-centric sketches. And that's it for that issue. Here's the last issue, number 4. He has all this photograph, this photo of candy. Jelly beans and stuff and gummy worms. The Too Sweet issue. Once again, we get 1 page of color for this story. God, it's nice coloring, though. So, once again, Lloyd is analyzing himself. And he says, "My mother raised me to be sweet and courteous in every way. Always be kind." And Lloyd finds that throughout his life, it's like he can't speak up. He just never wants to make waves. He always wants to be courteous and sweet. And one day he's leaving the convenience store and this guy starts chatting with him, totally spewing this really horrible racist stuff. And Lloyd's getting angrier and angrier, but he's thinking, why can't I say anything? Why am I so fucking sweet? And suddenly, he starts bashing on the guy, kicking him, strangling him. And then he shoves dog shit into his mouth. Look at this this ugly art here. And then we realize that it was just a fantasy. He says, "That's what I should have said. That's what I should have done." Instead, I just stood there and said nothing. I could totally relate to this. He wishes he could be more like his friend Wanda, this very strong woman he knows. They were out hiking one day in upstate New York. And Wanda, such a free spirit. It's a hot day. She just takes off all of her clothes except for her underwear. And so Lloyd follows her example. Then all of a sudden, these dirt bikers start racing through the forest, kind of ruining their idyllic day. They just keep coming. So finally, Wanda gets fed up and she walks out to the lake where they were all headed. And it's a big biker party. And with her tits hanging out, she just says, "Stop the infernal noise." And just yells at all these guys. And it looks like Lloyd is just so admiring of her. Someday I'd like to be a lot more like that. This is the second part of a delivered job. Man, I love this 2-page spread. Looks so good to me. With the little inset panels here and the 2-page drawing. Really nice stuff. So we see this construction dig in the city. And this guy finds this like ancient jar, and this scary skull drops out of it. And everyone's like, ah! Meanwhile, we see Lloyd racing to deliver his artwork. And as you remember last issue, that guy said, hey, don't go up any further. There's a big hole in the ground. They're doing construction. So Lloyd is feeling pretty cocky that he's going to make it on time. So he starts doing tricks on his bike. He's balancing on his nose. And then all of a sudden he sees the whole pot. Well, it's not a pothole, the giant hole in the ground. And there's some spilt oil in the ground. So he totally biffs it and slides into the hole. And then we see him plummet past all of these geological ages. And then he bunks his head in the ground, and we see this op art, and that's the end of the story. It even says question mark. Just a really just odd ending. But really well-drawn stuff. This next one is so interesting. It's called Dangerous Dangle in Dual Dangles. And we see a sign here with a nod of the shroud to Basil Wolverton. And this totally is an homage to Wolverton. I've never seen anyone do such a all-out homage to another artist. He's got all the stupid signs in the background. Barber, necks nicked quick. I hope she won't think it's snide, though, that I let her ride at my hide. So Dangerous Dangle doesn't really look like necessarily like a Basil Wolverton character. But other characters do, and you shall see them soon. Nude Dude Ranch. Basil Wolverton could have never had that gag. So Dangle finds a help wanted poster, rips it off the pole, and goes down to get the job. He has to wait in the reception area, and there's these two other graphic designers there. These guys are totally Basil Wolverton characters. So at least this guy, look at that. That's a really good aping of his style. And these guys are total bullies. They burn his art samples. They dump a fish tank on him. And then the bully guy says, here, put her there, pal. And then he breaks his hand. He says, let's see how well you draw after I flaw your paw. And they all laugh. So Dangle grabs their art sample cases and bashes them in the face. And he beats the crap out of these two bullies. Don't be crass, eat smallmouth bass. So stupid. So he goes in to meet the editor. And the editor's all like, what are you doing here? He recognizes him. I guess Dangerous Dangle is kind of famous. And Dangle says, I'm responding to this ad. And he's like, oh, those ads are for suckers. You got the job. I mean, you're Dangerous Dangle. So he shows him around, and a lot of people working there are fans of his, and they're like, would you autograph this magazine that you have an interview in for me? But then he looks at one of the tables, and he sees that one of the artists swipes his style, draws just like him. Not only did they maneuver my oeuvre, they also cribbed my jib. So I guess this is another client, this beer client. So the artist of this doesn't work in the office, so Lloyd wants his address. And he finds out the address. It's in Brooklyn, New York. And he runs off. I like how he's totally it's still Dangle style, but with this little slight Basil Wolverton overlay. He's not just totally copying it, like how Will Elder would do when he was doing a comic strip parody. So he takes the bus to New York, He has to sit next to some Jesus freak who bothers him the whole time. And I like this. He's walking down a street in Brooklyn, and everybody's like basically cliches of New Yorkers. This guy's doing a shell game. He's like, everybody's a winner. These guys playing stickball. Fuck you. Trout a ball, you douche. Simply gorgeous. That's a very Basil Wolverton face. So I guess just like a Powerhouse Pepper, he has powers. He says, this looks like the chump's dump. I prefer spontaneous escalation of stairs. And he just leaps up to this guy's apartment. So the guy not only draws like Dangle, he looks just like him. And he threatens him. And the poser, the imposter, he calls out his homies. And they have machine guns. And they fire at Dangle. And the bullets bounce right off of him. Because he's inhaled so much rubber cement over the years that he's bulletproof. He easily smacks the homies. And then the imposter jumps down the sink drain. And he comes out in the ocean, in the New York harbor, and Dangle's right on his tail. He starts punching the guy, and then a squid attacks Dangle. 2 seconds elapse, and it looks like Dangle ate the squid. He says, not bad calamari for such a dive. So he finds the guy again. He just knocking him around the whole waterfront, the ocean. And then when they get to land, it turns out it's just a latex face condom. He doesn't really look like Dangle. And the guy basically, he says, I worked at a copy store. That's all I did all day long. I stole your identity just because I couldn't take it anymore. And so Lloyd takes pity on him. This guy comes out of the water in a full business suit and says, hey, do you want to make a lot of money drawing our supermodel for this product? And Lloyd even takes on the imposter as his assistant. He says, you're so good at aping my style, you can help me. And then this actual supermodel is sitting on a can of beans, but Lloyd's just drawing her in the same crude, cartoony style he'd draw anything out of his imagination. So it's very silly. I love how realistic that face is. Once again, really nice colors. Colors aren't so good here. I guess his girlfriend colored this. It says on the inside cover. And let's get her name. Hai-Wan Kim. I went to see a psychic. And these colors are a little too dark. So Lloyd goes to see a mobile psychic. The type who tells your fortune while she drives you around. She says that you're psychic too. I can see it in your aura. And so he gets his reading, and then she drops him off at a Mexican restaurant, and he gets chili killies. So very odd little strip. I kind of like the idea of the mobile psychic, but it just kind of fizzles out at the end. Doesn't really have a point. So there you go, guys. Dangle, number 1 through 4. Some really fun comics. And these should be too hard to find. I think nobody cared about these at all. That's why Drawn and Quarterly never published number 5, and so on. So hope you enjoyed watching today's video, and I hope to see you next time here at the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.